This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets. Oil prices were stable on Monday amid expectations that major producers would keep supplies tight, as hopes grew for the Federal Reserve to leave interest rates unchanged to avoid dampening the U.S. economy. Brent crude futures for November crept 16 cents higher to $88.71 a barrel by 0800 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude, WTI, October futures rose 18 cents to $85.73 a barrel. Both contracts ended last week at their highest in more than half a year, after 2 previous weeks of losses.
Russia's seaborne diesel and gasoil exports in August rose by 2% from a month earlier to about 3.85 million metric tons on healthy fuel production, data from traders and LSEG showed. Idle primary oil refining capacity for August was estimated at 3.1 million metric tons versus 2.458 million metric tons in July, Refinitiv Icon data and Reuters calculations showed. After the full EU embargo on Russian oil products took effect on February 5, Turkey remains the main destination for Russian diesel and gasoil seaborne exports, reaching about 1.56 million metric tons in August, or about 40% of total month supplies, LSEG data shows.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
India has stepped up the use of coal to generate electricity in a bid to stop outages caused by lower hydroelectricity output, and as an increase in renewables is struggling to keep pace with record power demand. It is unusual for India's electricity use to spike in August, when temperatures are lower due to the annual monsoon that runs between June and September. Demand typically peaks in May, when Indians crank up air conditioners to beat the heat, and industries operate without rain-related disruptions. However, the driest August in more than a century has resulted in power generation surging to a record 162.7 billion kilowatt-hours, units, a Reuters analysis of data from the federal grid operator Grid India showed.
U.S. crude oil stocks have fallen to their lowest level this year and likely will shrink further, analysts said, as record demand, producer supply cuts, weaker futures and rising storage costs all point to increasing drawdowns. A tight crude market is poised to extend into 2024 and add upward pressure on global oil prices, they said. In a bullish sign, U.S. inventories last week dropped 10.6 million barrels, hitting the lowest level since December 2022's 420.65 million barrels. We are already around 2022's close and I don't think we are getting a build in the second half of the year, said Al Salazar, a senior vice president at energy technology firm Enverus. $100 a barrel for Brent crude is definitely within striking range.
Next, we have the top news in metal markets.
Shanghai nickel jumped on Monday to its highest in nearly 4 months, helped by rising oil prices, tightened supply from top producer Indonesia and firm demand from the stainless steel sector. The most traded October nickel contract on the Shanghai Futures Exchange ended daytime trade 3% higher at 170,710 yuan, $23,489.18 per metric ton, after rising as much as 4.8% earlier to its highest since May 9 at 175,740 yuan. Indonesia, which is the top exporter of nickel products to China, recently delayed issuing mining quotas, resulting in elevated prices and tightened supply of nickel ore.
India is monitoring steel imports after shipments from China touched a 5-year high in the first 4 months of the fiscal year that began in April, the country's steel secretary told Reuters on Monday. During April to July, China was the second biggest steel exporter to India, after South Korea, selling 0.6 million metric tons, up 62% from the same period a year earlier. India's domestic steel industry has raised concerns over potential dumping by Chinese sellers. We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector. Egypt's state grains buyer bought about 500,000 metric tons of Russian wheat in a private deal, 4 traders told Reuters, succeeding in negotiating lower prices than those offered in the more traditional tenders. One of the world's biggest importers of wheat, Egypt last year started shifting towards direct purchases instead of tenders after the war in Ukraine disrupted its buying. The General Authority for Supply Commodities, GASC, bought about 480,000 metric tons of Russian wheat from trading firm Solaris on Friday, at a price of about $270 a ton on a cost and freight basis, C&F, the traders said.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.